Welcome to our Stars and Steels battle report. We've got Tim as the Russians. I'm playing the Americans.
The name's Jesse.
Let's go.
So this is going to be the Russians, and we're going to have just a handful of 6 destroyer-sized squadrons, and these are all of the artillery variety. And then we're going to have 6 squadrons of 2 cruisers and 6 destroyers. These are all of the missile built variety. And then over here we're going to have 2 more squadrons of 6 each destroyers, and they are all missile variety as well.
Alright, representing the Americans, we've got Squadrons 1 and 2, which are 6 artillery cruisers and 4 point defense destroyers. Squadron 3 is 6 light carriers. Squadron 4, 5, and 6 are 2 missile cruisers, 6 missile destroyers. And then Squad 7 is just the remainder of 6 missile destroyers.
Forgot to mention here that our squadrons are all of the rigid variety, with the exception of the American carrier group, which is balanced. While that means that most of our squadrons are restricted to just 2 orders per turn, they will be rolling 2d6 and picking the highest for restoring order to their squadrons at the beginning of the turn. We were playing just the introductory scenario, meaning engagement. We decided to keep it a little clear of terrain just to get through the playing a game and experiencing the rules and becoming familiar with them. I will try to mention any mistakes we make along the way. But this first turn is pretty simple. We're just moving up. The only other order issued is the issue to launch flights on the American carrier group. Tim also has his non-flagship ships off to the side to get through the first turn, as they are kind of cumbersome with his giant swarm formation. We've moved up our forces and have issued orders for the second turn. Tim turning his forces as we are just out of range for our weapons contact. Our carrier group now has all 12 of its fighters launched and ready for action. Get into some of the first moves of the game that are important. Tim starts to move the majority of his fleet down the side. I move my group of missile destroyers down towards that direction as well, while only bringing up the core elements of my fleet just into range of where I expect Tim will move his fleet. Tim is not quite able to get his artillery destroyers past the bulk of his fleet, keeping them out of the fight for one more turn. As our fleets are now getting into combat range, Tim wins initiative. Tim starts his orders off by starting to focus fire on my lead group of artillery cruisers with his missile squadrons. After the first incoming blow, my squadron successfully passes its order check to perform evasive action, costing Tim some of those missiles. My lead squadron retaliates by shooting at one of his missile cruiser groups, able to get a +1 MP modifier for the crossing the T position as he is approaching my broadside arc. The second squadron is not so fortunate, but targets a separate squadron in range, also one of his missile cruiser groups. I split my missile fire amongst the same 2 targets I targeted with the artillery fire. Tim will also try all full ahead orders on his artillery destroyer groups to get them into the thick of combat next turn. Resolving the artillery attacks, one squadron takes 12 damage. This in total destroys 4 of the missile destroyers. The second squadron targeted by artillery fire suffers 7 damage and loses 2 missile cruisers and 2 missile destroyers. Now on to the movement phase, where Tim's missile squadron starts to hook around the board and his artillery destroyer groups charge forward into the melee. In the fighter phase, the American carrier squadron launches its fighters in a missile attack against one of the Russian artillery destroyer squadrons. Tim's overwhelming missile firepower, with just under 100 shots, was not fazed by my 11-point defense hits, and did 17 damage to the squadron, completely destroying it. The Russian artillery destroyer group shot down 3 missiles against them, resulting in them only receiving 4 damage and taking no casualties. Tim's damaged missile cruiser squadrons lost a total of 1 cruiser and 2 destroyers throughout their ranks. In this next order phase, the Russian artillery destroyer groups are now threatening the American fleet, focusing their fire on the carrier group. The Russian missile forces also choose to focus on the American artillery cruiser group that remains. American missile fire is concentrated on one of the flanking Russian missile cruiser squadrons. American artillery cruiser group tries to use the full barrage order to give them a bonus on their artillery firepower this turn at the cost of not being able to use it the following turn. They succeed, increasing their damage against one of the Russian missile cruiser squads. Unfortunately, the American air carrier group tries a scramble order, which is effectively the same thing for flights, and fails, launching only the standard number and costing it its flight launch in the following turn. In the next artillery phase, the American carrier squadron takes 9 damage and loses half of its number, being reduced to 3 light carriers. The Russian artillery destroyer group in the front takes 4 more damage and loses 4 destroyers. Another one took 1 damage and suffered no losses. The American artillery cruiser group largely fails to damage the Russians, dealing 6 damage, but they take no losses, as a major blow has been dealt to the Americans due to poor shooting. In this movement phase, we've gotten a little ahead of ourselves, and we close to cause disruption on each other, without realizing that it technically should negate future missile orders if we are within 1 distance unit. However, this largely doesn't impact the outcome of the game. In the flight phase, my fighters target one of the heavily damaged Russian artillery destroyer squadrons, hoping to finish it off. They do accomplish that goal, dealing 3 damage and destroying the squadron. The American artillery cruiser squadron suffers 16 damage and loses 2 destroyers and 3 cruisers, while the Russian missile cruiser squadron on the flank suffers also 16 damage, loses 5 destroyers and 2 cruisers, leaving only a lone destroyer left. In this orders phase, almost all of our units have too much disorganization to do any special orders. We did miss the missiles cannot fire while you are within 1 distance unit of an opponent, but other than that, Tim focuses on spreading out his firepower. I concentrate my firepower predominantly in a missile cruiser unit on the center of the board, and try to hit a couple of the damaged artillery destroyer squadrons with nearby artillery fire from my units. The Americans, suffering from the loss of their artillery fire from their cruiser group due to the prior turn's actions, only managed to destroy 2 Russian missile destroyers with artillery fire. Meanwhile, the Russians destroy 1 destroyer from the American artillery cruiser group, 1 carrier from the carrier group, and from the 1st missile cruiser group engaged, loss of both missile cruisers and a missile destroyer. As we enter this movement phase, again, we are not considering the missiles can't fire at close proximity, but at this point, we probably figured that this is the final turn of the game, as the American forces are heavily flagging and are not looking too good at the moment. The Russians still outnumbering them fairly significantly. Missile resolution phase, the Russians managed to finish off the American carrier squadron, but the Americans managed to also decimate the Russian missile cruiser squadron that had escaped damage from the American artillery cruiser squadron due to poor rolls earlier in the game. There was enough damage left over that 8 more damage destroyed all 6 destroyers and 2 cruisers of the squadron. This is where we decided to call it, so I thought I would share some of our afterthought games with you. Unfortunately, our camera didn't capture it very well. This was interesting that it felt a little bit like a rank and flank game in some regards, possibly due to our group bases we made. The artillery destroyers, even though they were short range, performed much better than I initially thought, but most all of our units were disrupted, and we didn't use special orders that often, but having the versatility beyond the rigid commanders may have been beneficial in a couple of cases. Still, the special orders, full barrage, full salvo, and scramble that don't let you fire the turn afterwards are pretty rough. I mean, it's a difficult gamble, and if you fail, the penalty is very punishing. Still very interesting. I think it's going in the future, we're going to have to maybe reserve its use to smaller squadrons that are more temporary. Look forward to trying out some of the other scenarios in the book and adding in terrain. Thanks to Salt Publishing Studios, fun game, and thanks for S-Mite for the American ship design, and Nylor for the background music. Thanks for watching. Like the video if you enjoyed it, and if you're interested, we may do more of these battle reports. Hopefully we'll get better. We may also cover Victory at Sea when that gets officially released in the United States. Thanks. See you next time.